All right, hello and welcome back to everyone, and welcome to those if this is your first time. I am Trish, and I have before us two Phalaenopsis that I just got at Lowe's. Went there for something else and I saw these and they were $8 a piece. Now, this one, look at all this moss, and it's dry. Like, look how dry that is. And then this one came in this wrapper thing. I'm sure this had it around it as well. And the moss in here is soaking wet, just soak and wet. So what I'm going to do, while we unpot this one and look and see what the roots are with this one, I'm going to put some water in here, let some of this moss get wet on the inside, since we are going to repot her, just to make it easier on the root system. And I do have my pot here, but let me just hold it over the sink real quick, guys. Hold on. Let's see, there we go. Just enough to get the moss wet in there, because otherwise it's going to be a little hard to get the moss off the roots. So we'll just set her off to the side while she is doing her thing. Move that out the way. All right, so these are the instructions. It says to place it in a comfortable, draft-free room with moderate to bright and direct sunlight. Agree with that. Then it says to keep it moist. Don't agree with that too much. Phalaenopsis can be kept, they can be kept moist, but generally they do like to dry it a little bit in between waterings. It says in winter, water 1 to 2 times per week. In summer, 2 to 3 times per week. Orchids grown in moss, water once every 7 to 10 days. There's a problem with that. What if in your environment in 7 to 10 days, your moss is still wet and you are following the directions and you water it? So now you're giving it water that it doesn't need, and then the roots are going to suffocate and they're going to go kaput, such as this root here. So let's get started. There is no spike on here. It is spent, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the spike just to make it easier on us. So this one here is the Phalaenopsis Sogo Yakadain. Looked it up. It is supposed to be a big white flower. Not a big fan of white orchids in general, but depending on what that lip looks like, I may keep it. If not, I've already let my daughter know that she may be inheriting an orchid once this reblooms. And say that with such confidence, don't I? So let's take our stake out. So I do have my Fiskars soaking for a little bit, so I'm going to take it out and let it go ahead and start drying out to evaporate and kill anything. This poor plant, I just feel so bad for it. I'm just going to squeeze the sides of it real quick while I'm letting that evaporate a little bit. And I've got this box that I'm just going to catch everything in. We're going to go ahead, and I'm not going to cut this all the way back quite yet, because I might want to use this to stake. So I'm just going to cut it up above here. Move that out the way. And put that back in there for a second. There we go. All right, so let's see what we've got inside, guys. Never grab your Phalaenopsis like by the stem. Always try to grab it from as close to the base as you can if you're going to pull it out. All right, just like that. And look, this moss is already, let me just stick that behind here real quick. This moss is already starting to degrade. Let's just see. And it smells not horribly bad, but it smells. So, let's see. Looks like she was up potted. So that fell off rather easily. So this was what she was grown in before they put all that moss around it. And I guarantee you there's got to be at least one more plug in there from when she was grown on from a seedling and potted up. A lot of nurseries will do that, especially if they're in moss. So I will be repotting her into bark, chunky bark. I will keep her watered quite frequently just because she's used to being wet. The roots actually so far don't look too bad. Sorry, puppy's back there barking a little bit, but and this is why sometimes the directions that come with our orchids aren't always the best to follow. The best to do, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, because like in my environment, moss dries out pretty quickly because it's pretty dry in here. And I'm a cold-natured person, so I tend to keep it rather warm in my home. Whereas if your home is a little cooler, it's going to take it a little longer to dry because it's not going to evaporate as quickly. So this moss will stay wet. And this was, look how deep she was buried in that moss. Matter of fact, at the store, I pulled moss out from in between these leaves here to let it start drying out. They just had it up so high. It's ridiculous. All right. Like I said, so far, the roots are a lot better than I was expecting them to be. I do have a couple of pots that I would love to put them in. I just think they would look really pretty because they are going to be big girls, as you can see, as well as their blooms are the really big blooms. If you've never seen the Phalaenopsis Sogo, look it up. Those blooms are huge, and they make, depending on how healthy it is, it makes a large cascading display that you need space for. So once I see her starting to rebloom, which probably won't be for a good year, because it takes them a while to reestablish into your home. If you get one that's really, really healthy and not too much of a change in environment, then they pretty much bounce back. But because this one is going from moss to bark, and then from a different, even just temperature wise, she's probably going to pout for a little bit, and it's going to take her a minute to get adjusted to my home. And then hopefully she will give us a bloom show next year. If she blooms this year, I'll be very surprised. Very, very surprised. So, and then I've got my tweezers here. And what I like to do with my tweezers is I like to get in between, especially when you have these big, thick, juicy roots like this. You don't really want to stick your finger in there and chance breaking them. So I just take the tweezers and I'll just pull the moss out from in between the tweezers. It just makes it a little bit easier. I will eventually run her under the tap, but I do like to get as much of the moss out as possible, just so I don't clog my sink up too much, because that's not fun to clean out. So, and plus you can get really big pieces out as well. So, and like I said, her roots aren't as bad. She's got a lot of branches on here. And for those of you who are kind of new to orchids, if you notice, some of these roots are green and then some of them kind of have a yellow tinge to them. These yellow ones, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just they haven't been in the light, so they're not producing chlorophyll. These right here were probably at one time in a plastic pot before they put it in the decorative pot to sell. And so it got the sun, and so it produced chlorophyll. But chlorophyll is not the main thing that roots are responsible for, so it's not a big deal if you have some on the inside that are just a little bit brown, looking more on the yellow brown. Now, if they're brown, then they're dead. So, such as this one. So, see how brown that is there? That's dead. We'll cut that off here in just a few moments. Let's get these on this side. So, and the best way to tell if roots are good or not, if you just kind of tug on it a little bit and the velamen comes off and you're just left with the string, that string is actually the root. This outer portion here that we call the root is actually the velamen that protects the root and gives it the hydration that it needs. Because the roots are actually these little thin stringy things here. Let's see if we can get it. There we go. See it? And this one is green. And if she were like really low on the roots, I would probably keep it just for a backup. I mean, if it's still green, it's going to be doing something. But she's got plenty, so I probably am not going to keep too much, because most of these are going to die off. Just because, like I said, she's going from a wet medium into a more drier, airier medium. So she's going to have to adjust to that. And the way that I'm going to kind of work with that is I'm going to water her a little more often until I see new roots start developing and going into the media. And then I will just kind of put her on the same schedule as my other phals are, where she has a more dry cycle in between. And normally I would just leave her in this, but like I said, it was just potted up way too high on there, and it was just way too wet. And so normally I would train her before I repotted her. And the way I do that is I just let the moss dry out, and then I just slowly let it get drier and drier in between each time before I water. And this way they kind of start adjusting to being drier in between waterings. All right, well, that's all the moss we're going to take off for now. Now the fun part. Let's clean her roots up just a little bit here. So that one. And then this one, I'm just going to cut the tip off just because it's a little brown on the edge. Just to kind of encourage it to either extend or produce a branch. This one here, so it's got this green, and then it's got a little brown tip that's mushy. So we're just going to cut it off, even though she's got some stuff going on down at the bottom. Let's just get rid of what we can and set her up for success in her new medium as much as possible. So let's see, what else do we have here? All right, let's just cut that one off. Alrighty, I think we are done with this one. Nope, we've got some in here. And she did not have the seedling plug in here like I was expecting. So I guess when they uppotted her, they did take that initial seedling plug out, and then when they uppotted her again, they just stuck around and then just crammed in moss around it. So all right, let's see. So that one is already broke right there. So we're just going to cut that branch off. I'm going to go and rinse her off at the sink, and I will be right back. All right, so we are back, and here is the root system. Like I said, it's actually a nice root system. So we do have some stuff to work with here, which is great. Now what I'm going to do is going to spray her roots with hydrogen peroxide. I missed a piece. Let me grab my tweezers out of here. Hold on. All right, there we go. There we go. All right, so I'm going to spray the roots with hydrogen peroxide. Some people say it's not necessary for the Phalaenopsis, others do. Some just do it on some plants if they see the bugs. I like to do it on each one because I want to make sure that if there is any little critter hiding in there or their eggs hiding on there, then I want to get rid of it. So let me get this, and we're going to let her sit in this tray. I'm going to grab a cotton ball, probably two, and set that there, and I'm going to spray it with hydrogen peroxide, and I'm going to wipe the leaves. So I'm going to start with the bottommost leaf and just wipe all the stuff off. And then this way, again, because of the hydrogen peroxide, if there are some little eggs or anything like that laid on the leaf, then we are going to kill them. Generally, you don't want to wipe the bottom of your Phalaenopsis leaf, just because that's where the stomatas are. That's how they breathe. When I first get one, I do wipe the bottom the one time, again, just to ensure that there's nothing hiding underneath there that might go into my collection once I put them in after their little quarantine time. So spray a little bit more here. So, and there are some people who will wash their Phalaenopsis or orchids or plants in general just under the tap when they first get it. I don't like doing that unless I know that I'm going to have everything dry by the end of the day, just because I don't want crown rot or stem rot to set in. And Phalaenopsis are very, very prone to that. So, okay. And her leaves are still kind of nice and thick and firm. So that will be a good indicator too of once I move her into the media as far as how she's doing. And like I said, I expect both of them to kind of pout a little bit and give me a hard time and kind of droop a little probably for the first month or so, just because of the change in media. All right, let's turn her around and let's get the other side. And then I have some Phalaenopsis, or orchids in general, but since I love my Phalaenopsis, and mostly what I have in my collection are the phals. But most of them don't really give me too much trouble at the repot, even when I move them from the moss to the bark, just because you just have to kind of mimic what they're used to being in until they get used to what you want them to do. And like I said, neither one of them have blooms on them right now, so no chance of losing a bloom or a bud. And when I do repot them in bloom, the most I have lost is a bud or two, but the blooms themselves are fine. And it's usually the younger buds that I lose, but the ones that are a little more mature, they'll go ahead and open back up. So don't be afraid to repot while in bloom. I know there are theories that say you should wait for them to drop their bloom unless there's a desperate need to repot because of bad roots or whatever. And if it's bad roots, you should cut the blooms anyway so that she can concentrate on the roots and vegetative growth and not supporting blooms. So either way it goes, it doesn't matter. So, and at the end of the day, it is a personal choice and your preference. So everything that I say or that's written in books or other YouTubers might put out there, it's just what works for them in their environment. And it's their guide on, if you have an environment similar to mine, then this is what may work for you. I grow in my living room. It is a main room. It's not specifically just for the orchids and the houseplants. It's literally a lived-in space. So if you grow in that type of an environment, then you have a similar environment to mine. However, if you have a grow room that is specifically set up for your orchids, where you can control the temperature and the humidity, and the airflow and whatnot, then my way may not work for you because you have different environmental factors. So, doesn't she look so much better now that we've cleaned her up? So, what I want to do is, I want to put her, let me move this tray out of the way real quick. I want to put her in this pot, kind of like this. But, and I mean, the roots, she's got enough roots, I can do it. They're long enough. And I feel like these newer roots here, because they are still kind of young, will go down into the media. So that's what we're going to do. I've already filled my little cooking tray, what is this, a mixing bowl up. And this is large bark. It's got some perlite in it, a couple of rocks that just happen to be in there. There is no moss. I'm not putting any moss in there. Like I said, they're going to be straight bark and perlite and a few little rocks that are in there. So let's just put some at the bottom and shake it in there. And I'm pretty sure this is not enough for this, but I just wanted to get it started. So move it around here. And I always start lower in the pot because then I can pull her up. It's a lot easier to pull up than it is to push them back down once they are in there. And this pot does have aeration all the way around it. And I feel like this is going to work really well with the transition just because the air, there's going to be airflow, but it's not going to be so hard where this bark is going to dry out really fast. So I think these are going to work just fine. I actually bought these, I don't know, about 2 years ago. Can't remember. I bought them for orchids, but the orchids I bought them for, they were way too big for them. So I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. One day I will find something to work in there. So there we go. All right, and then just kind of tap the sides a little bit. Get everything to settle in. I want to say it was Ed from Ed's Orchid, and he called it spanking the pot. Thought that was kind of cute. So I am going to stake her just to keep her steady in the pot. Where's my little, oh, there it is. So there it is. So there we go. This way she's not going to move around too much. So you know what? It might work better if I take it out here. just so I can see that everything is settling in. There we go. And then you just kind of keep turning it around, just to, because you want the media to go in between the roots down there at the bottom as well. So, and if you can see, because I had this full to the top, now that I've kind of banged around a little bit, see how much space is in there? I can stick my finger. My finger is, it's almost a full finger length. So that just means that we need more in there. So, and you'll just keep doing that until the pot is at the level, or the media is at the level that you want it. So, all right, so I'm gonna finish this, and then once I'm done with this one and done with the, now I'll unpop the other one and kind of show you the difference in how hard it is to get the moss off when it's not completely wet. And then I'll be right back. All right, guys, so we're back. So she's all potted up in her new home. And like I said, I do expect her to be a little pouty for maybe a month or two, but she will eventually establish herself and be just fine. I will give her a good water once I'm done here and we look at the other one. And I have added some of my Osmocote just kind of around, just to kind of help. And let me put her to the side here. All right, so let's grab this one. So this one's been sitting in the moss. We did water it a little bit. So this one here is the Phalaenopsis Timothy Christopher crossed with Phalaenopsis Amabillis. Let me just show you right there. And she also is going to be a white one. So interesting. I'm not sure what the lip is going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and write today's date on here. It's the 9th of March of 21. There we go. We'll just set that to the side. So, like the last one, let's just cut this spike off because we're not looking at blooms. And I am going to do like I did the last time. I'm just going to cut it kind of right there. So if I need to use this for support, I have it for support. Take out this big juicy long stake, and I will disinfect those stakes later and have them to use for when these girls hopefully rebloom. So now this one, I already see there's a problem. If you look, she's dry right in here, so we may have not be able to do something with her. But you know what, let's just take her out and see. Again, hold it as close to the base as you can, and I can actually hook up underneath. So the moss at the bottom is wet, and that's where I just poured it. And it just reached halfway up. So, but up, and there goes the leaf. Yep. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, we have a dead plant. So, but you know what? We are still going to see if we can work with her because you know what? Let's just see what we can do. She's still in the original plug that is soaking wet. And when I poured the water, as you guys saw, I poured it on the edge. So this is still wet from whenever they watered it the last time. Her roots are nowhere near as good as the roots that our Sogo Yakadain came in. So, I mean, they're not terrible, but I'm a little upset that I lost that leaf. But you know what, guys? I paid $8 for her. I was kind of expecting them both to really be in bad root health and just bad shape altogether. But fortunately, one is pretty good. The other one is going to need a lot of TLC. So she's just going to look a little wanky for a little while, but that's okay. She will make it or she won't. And if she doesn't, it's not like I paid online pricing and, you know, eBay pricing, or I bid on her and then got a horrible plant. So I knew what I was getting when I purchased her. And that's just kind of part of the hobby, is sometimes you do pick plants and you're like, oh my goodness gracious, you look so horrible. Let me take you home. Sometimes we save them, sometimes we don't. I did do a video on why we have rescue orchids and plants. And well, here's a prime example of why we would have those. Because we have soft hearts. So her roots, although not bad, are not great either. There are a lot of desiccated roots in here. A lot of moss, and the moss on here smells. It's a little more potent than the last time. And as you can see, she's got a lot of dead velamins here. So let's just keep working at it here. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut some of this before I rinse her off, just to kind of get rid of most of it. Let's see, that one's pretty good. I do have, and these have been disinfected in between, guys. You know what, I'm going to cut her off here because it is broken. And then she's got a desiccated branch right here. Just go ahead and cut that off. And I have changed out the gloves as well. So these are different gloves. Cut that one off. Now with this one, I am having to be a little more picky with what I keep and what I don't keep, just because her roots are not quite as good as the previous Phalaenopsis that we looked at. So there's a lot of blackening on these. So let's see, got a lot more cleanup on this one, that's for sure. So like I said, if she makes it, you know, I'll be happy, but if she doesn't, I won't be too upset, because I kind of figured I would have a issue here. Let's see, is that it is on the end of that, so let's clip that off. And let's see, clip that one off here. And if you don't have a pair of pruners with a nice sharp tip like this, I highly suggest that you invest in them. If you just have scissors, you can do it, and you can do it with the pointy scissors, but it's just these Fiskars, I just love them so much. You can just really get in there and be a little precise and not risk cutting something you're not trying to cut. So I'm going to clip off all of these black tips that are on here as well, because again, she has a branching root system as well. So maybe by clipping the black tip off, I can encourage a little more root growth. So let's see, there we go. And all right, let's clip that one. It does have a branch on one side, but this tip here is kind of brown. So, okay, so here's an example. This one here, sorry guys, this one here, see how green it is? But look at this. If you pull on this, it just pulls right off. But it's still green underneath. So I am going to leave the root on there. I'm just going to take all of the dead velamin off. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier when I said that other root, because this right here, this string part right here is actually the root. The outer portion is the velamin that protects the root and nourishes it and holds on to the moisture to give it to the root. So when we say roots, we're really talking about the outer velamin part when we say water once they get silvery. And that's the best time to water your Phalaenopsis, is when their roots become kind of a silvery green. And depending on how you water, I top water mine. And then once a month, I will soak them. Give them a really good soak, and just plain water with some Epsom salt to kind of flush out all the excess that might be in there. I do feed every other watering, and then so this last watering I did had feed, so the next one won't have feed, so I'll flush out any extra that might have gotten in there that the orchid doesn't use, and that helps kind of keep that buildup from going. So I will be turning us off for a second while I go rinse her out, and then we'll be back. All right, so we are back. So I have her all cleaned up. I've already sprayed the hydrogen peroxide on her, and I've cleaned up her leaves. Upon further inspection, if you look right here, well, let's see if I can move this, yeah, because he's all floppy. I can just move. Do you see this right here? It looks like that was sunburn because it's dry. Looks like it got sunburned, and where my the Lowe's that I purchased this from, where they do keep their orchids, especially the Phalaenopsis, is right by the door, the glass door, where the sun comes in. So she was probably just sitting too close to the door and got burnt. So, and then the other leaf that broke off was also dry here. So we are just going to, originally I planned on putting her in the same white pot. However, as we can tell, she needs something a little different. So I did also have some of my smaller pots. So we will be putting her in this one. And obviously we will be staking her. Let's see, this way. Let's see if she sits like that. Yep, all right. So we got some more of our goodies here. Let's put some more in the bottom. And then we are going to, let's start here. Put her on this side here. Move this over. And I'm going to do her like that. And then let's just start pouring in. Pouring in and pat, pour in and pat. So. All right, so I'll finish this and then I will come back once she is done and we will have our final thoughts on what's going to happen. All right, so we are done. So here is our final result of this, and I did make sure to put some of the roots on the outside just so I can kind of keep an eye on them. I did kind of pack it a little tighter than I would normally with a Phalaenopsis just because they're used to being a little more snug and a little less air in there. So I will keep her, make sure I, like I said, give them a good water, and then I'm going to keep her in this terracotta pot that will still allow it to breathe, but sit up high enough so that this leaf isn't sitting on anything and not moving it around too much. So that is our Phalaenopsis Timothy Christopher crossed with our Phalaenopsis Amabillis, and that's Amabills. And then this one here, I do expect it to sulk for a little bit, like I said, but I don't expect too many big issues out of this one. I think she'll transition pretty well. This one here will be a touch and go. We'll have to baby her for a little while and see what happens. Hopefully she'll push out a new leaf or a keiki at the very least. And then we can see her beautiful blooms. If not, only $8, not a big loss. This one, I do expect her to bloom for me. Again, it will be at least next year before she will, because it usually takes them about a year and a half to get adjusted to my house and my environment and my growing method and my watering and my fertilizing and whatnot. Because you have to think they come from the perfect environment of a nursery and then they're put on a truck where God knows how long they sit there. Then they're transported to their respective stores where they can sit out in the elements until whoever needs to bring them in brings them in, or they can sit in their box. I've worked for a big box before in the garden center, and I know how it works. I've actually had employees who left the box for the next shift and they closed, so they would sit in the Louisiana humid heat in a box all night, and half the time they would come out and we would have to mark them down immediately, well, because they looked horrible. So we don't know what they go through before they come to us, and all we can do is just kind of baby them and take care of them and make sure that we give them a good home, good environment, the best that we can. Like I said, the advice that I've given is what works for me here in my environment, and I do grow in my living room, so I don't have the controlled humidity, controlled temperatures, controlled lighting, other than I do use a grow light. I have a shelf that I do use grow lights on, but not all of my plants sit under that. So most of my plants are either sitting facing a window, or they're close to a window, or they're by a mirror that reflects the window, and then I've painted my living room a lighter color just so that it reflects the light and makes it a little brighter. So again, if you enjoyed this, got something out of it, give it a like. Feel free to share with your friends, And we will see you on the next one. If you have any of these orchids that you've saved, especially ones that look like this, share down in the comments below your kind of some care tips so we can all kind of continue saving orchids. Have a good one.